Somebody must have made up Anansi the spider, but we're never going to know who. Whatever the first Anansi story was about, it's probably lost forever. We still know Anansi's name because he inspires great fan fiction. Before AO3, we had fire pits. Originality has never been the main thing about fiction. What people mostly want is to hear another story about the characters they already love. This is Library Pizza, a podcast about reading. I'm Mike Meginnis. When I say that I think fan fiction is a larger, far older, more capacious tradition than what we might call original fiction, I suspect people think that I'm doing a bit. But I do mean it literally. Our contemporary focus on originality is a byproduct of copyright law and the cult of the genius. We've been making up stories about gods, heroes, animals, and cobblers for a much longer time than we've been writing Gatsby. And most popular original stories are only minor variations on established imaginary people. That doesn't make fan fiction better or more important than the other kind of fiction, but it does make it funny that the younger, more delicate genre's practitioners so frequently presume to condescend to its elder sibling. Lately, I've been trying to read more fan fiction, inspired in part by the enthusiastic blue sky posts of Rachel Jane Andelman, who is currently my Skyline's most emphatic shipper. Rachel kindly joined me and my partner Tracy Rae Bowling for a discussion of fan fiction in general and Rachel's favorite character pairing in particular. I hope to return to this subject routinely in future episodes. Rachel Jane Andelman is a writer, performer, and improv coach in the Boston area. She has taught at ImprovBoston and Union Comedy. She currently performs improv with independent cast Tales of Enstonishment and Magic, The Gathering, The Show, as well as her stand-up act in the Boston area and beyond. We'll join the conversation in progress after my very dignified theme music.
Yeah, I mean, even the rabbit, who has like a very Sisyphean existence in those commercials, like always begins with a lot of hope and a lot of drive. Like he never loses that optimism which defines his character.
Do we think that the Trix rabbit just hasn't seen the commercials? Like he isn't aware of the fact that when the cameras are rolling, that means he's about to get punked?
I think he doesn't know the edit that he's getting.
Yes.
You know? Who knows what's like before and after what we see. He probably thinks he's getting like the hero edit. This is his quest for Trix. And then he, maybe gets some at the end. We don't know.
I like to think that whenever the cameras aren't rolling, he is getting the tricks. Like of him getting the tricks. We just don't see those. We don't see those times.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if that would be like a really cruel strategy or if that would actually be really nice. If it's like what we do in order to create the experience, the narrative of the crestfallen Trix rabbit is most of the time we aren't filming and we let him have as much tricks as he wants and all of his schemes succeed. And then we turn the cameras on and he is shocked and appalled to discover that this one time it's not going to work out.
And then they have like a reunion show at the end where he's like in a room with the kids and they're like, so Trix, how do you feel about the way you were portrayed in these commercials? And he's like, yeah, I get the tricks all the time. And so it's really surprising to me. And then the kids have various sort of they have various problems within themselves that they're solving.
Yes.
Yeah, 15 minutes of political maneuvering to distribute the tricks cut out after every situation where they do get them instead of the rabbit.
Yeah, I'm excited to hopefully in some sort of big budget movie starring Jim Carrey, hopefully explore those relationships and explore that dynamic between the kids and the rabbit.
That's inspired casting.
Is he the rabbit itself, or is he a previously unknown, like adult male figure that thwarts or befriends the rabbit?
I was assuming he was the rabbit, but he could also be like an original character who sort of creates the reason that the kids have access to the rabbit or encounter the rabbit in the first place.
Sort of like the dad in the Lego movie, a Will Ferrell.
Mm.
I think he's one of these guys. There's like a class of actor who will declare at some point, I at this point have kind of made my money and I don't really need to do movies for money anymore. So if you see me doing something in the future, it's because I really wanted to do it, right? And I like thinking about that when you see him as Dr. Robotnik in the commercials for the Sonic movies, where it's like, he didn't need to do this for money. He saw the script and he was like, this is what I need to be doing right now. This is urgently important art.
He's like, give me the script to is going to be the most exciting. It'll make the most money, but it'll also make you think the most. And they're like, well, we have a script that hits all of those areas, that hits all those targets. And it was the Sonic movies. Now there's going to be who knows how many of them.
The management process that his representation is going through to get him to the point where he's like, yes, this is where I need to be. They lead him in. Ironically, they use cereal to lure him into the office and get him into a good mood so he can.
Known cereal fiend.
Yes.
I like to imagine an intern having that responsibility. Like, listen, you've got to convince him that this movie is like smart, intelligent, on the cusp, relevant to today's society. If you fail, he's not going to do it.
Mm.
On the cusp is that's a new way of expressing that idea to me. I like that, because on the edge, like, it's dangerous. You could be cut by the sharp knife. On the cusp, what that implies to me, and tell me if this is what you're thinking, you're so on the edge that you're actually about to fall off. Like, you are in real peril of disappearing entirely.
It's like, it's kind of like the last gasp of whatever trend that they want to get the person on board with. It's like, listen, we're about to lose our shot. The door is closing.
Oh, so this is
have to act
behind.
now.
The edge is in front of you.
It's about to be behind because you're on the cusp.
Yes. Okay.
You haven't tipped over yet, but yeah, you're losing the opportunity with each additional conversation you have.
I feel just thinking about this geometric shape I'm on, covered in edges. And just like gliding through a void on this like tetrahedron, and you're like, edge. Am I on the cusp?
Did you see the new shape that I've seen posts about this, the new shape that they discovered that can't pass through itself, and apparently they've been trying for like 3 decades or centuries or something after like a duke dared another duke to try and think of a geometric shape that could theoretically not pass through itself. And have you seen this thing?
I did see the article, and I passed it along to my friend he is a PhD, and he got his PhD in complex polytopes. So I was like, I think you're like my shape guy. And he's like, oh, I've never seen this problem before. It's a very elegant question. But he was critical of the solution, which he called inelegant. So I think that math guys, numbers guys, shapes guys, they like elegance. And when something like is like, well, it's correct, but it's kind of ugly. I think that's where he landed on that news.
Yeah, that shape to me was like, it was disappointing to me. And this also wasn't a problem that I'm aware of. And also, I'm not a numbers or a shape guy. I can't do math. I never made it through any geometry at all. Because I was homeschooled, I had the luxury of opening the book, flipping through some pages, and then telling my mom, like, oh yeah, I'm totally doing geometry. And then later admitting to her, like, no, I didn't understand a damn thing. But to me, it really looks like, those like Brock's candy dinosaur eggs that they would like advertise in like comic books and stuff when I was a kid. It just looks to me like somebody chomped one of those like partway in half. And to me, like, it felt like if that shape, like just kind of fucking up an egg, was a good solution to the problem of how to make a shape that couldn't pass through itself, I feel like we could have fucked up that egg like so many ways. Like, why was that the particular fucked up egg that solved the problem of all these years?
Yeah, I'll ask my I'll ask my friend, I'm like, did the egg have to be fucked up in this particular way? And why does it look nicer?
I just absolutely love the idea of both having shape news in this day and age, like just new news in shapes, and also the idea of having a shapes guy. Just like
Do
a
you have
bookie.
other guys? Like, is there anybody
Yeah.
else that you're like is sort of a member of your cabinet that you're relying on for this sort of news?
Yeah, so I've always felt like the most important thing in my life is just to have people who are smarter than me, like within arm's reach. So I do have a lot of people who are good at things that I'm not good at. You know, I have computer guys and I have music guys. I do think my shapes guy is like that's like the highest level of abstraction in
Yeah.
terms of the expertise that I am reaching out for. Um, I don't know if I have like a lines guy or like
Would you take a lines issue to your shapes guy, or is that like outside of his area of expertise?
Yeah, he's just sort of like, yeah, I don't really like lines. They're not elegant like shapes are.
I really need like at least two, I think three, is it three lines before you have a shape? I mean, a circle's a line, but a circle, you can't really get into circles. Like once you start down that road, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So I think his deal is that complex polytopes, there are a lot of shapes that sort of exist on paper or like in theory that you can't actually create within like the three dimensions that we inhabit. But that doesn't mean that they are not real because they satisfy certain conditions
Mm.
of shapeness. We just can't see them or experience them ourselves. So he would probably be like, well, you can make a shape with two lines, but you can't see it because of our limitations. And I'd be like, that's very fair.
I mean, it sounds like you've really internalized a lot of this guy's wisdom, which I think your system is working. I'm curious, do you remember a previous incident, a previous shapes issue that you took to him? Like there was another shape announced, or what was the last conversation you had about a shape?
That's a great question. Um, I feel like most of our conversations are not related to shapes. Mostly we might well he would be like, "Oh, have you heard about this like fun logic problem?" And you know, you're like, "Oh, you have two envelopes and one of them's for $50 and one of them's for who knows how much." And you're like, "Oh, which one do you choose?" And I'm sure I'm bastardizing this basic premise,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of like logic problems that I think math people really go for, and you're like, actually, if you think about it, and then you're like, wow, I'm thinking about it, and now I see where you're coming from. So like one example is he of him and the way he thinks is he'll be like, oh, you know, everyone uses the word random wrong. By random, people mean surprising, right? You're like, that was a random guy who starred in that movie. But in math terms, random means as likely as any other outcome.
I suppose that's true.
Right, that's right. And so you're like, okay, well, I guess actually that wasn't random because it's more likely for Jared Leto to star in that movie than me. So actually slightly more than random in the sense it was plausible.
I have a really angering shape memory, which is when I was in college, I knew this guy who was I was in the chess club, which like that sounds like nerd bragging, like but it's not even that because I was like the worst guy in the chess club. Like I didn't know anything about how to play chess, despite the fact that as a when I first got on the internet and I chose my AOL Instant Messenger screen name, it was Chess Mind because I was like pretty sure I was gonna be good at chess or something. I don't know. But there was this guy in the chess club he asked me if I wanted to see a two-dimensional shape. He was like, I can make a real two-dimensional shape. This is gonna blow your mind. I'm like, okay, good, lay it on me. And he takes a piece of like a thin piece of paper and he twists it around and makes a Mobius strip. And I'm like, that's three-dimensional. And he says, no, no, it isn't because it only has two sides, or maybe only one side. It was,
One
yeah, it
side
was only
was
one
probably
side
the
because
argument,
it
yeah.
twists around. And I'm like, but it's still, I can see it and you can physically interact with it. So even though paper is thin, it's still And every time I think about like that conversation went on for like 10 or 15 minutes where he was really trying to persuade me he had created a two-dimensional shape and I was just losing my mind.
Well, you had a two-dimensional argument because he was on one side and you were on the other.
And we couldn't see through that plane. There was no meeting. There was no depth available to us. We were just trapped. So when I invited you to be on Library Pizza, my pitch to you was the sort of Trix cereal that I left in a trail was I want to talk to you about fan fiction. So I don't know, how would you summarize your relationship to fandom generally, fan fiction specifically? Because I feel like I've noticed I'm gonna speak at like sky level, like my sort of very general, like noticing out of the corner of my eye abstraction of what it looked like happened, and then you can fill me in. I feel like you've gone through a series in your like Twitter and then your Blue Sky posts of really friendly, sort of comforting fascinations. I remember you had an NBA phase that was like really intense. And I think you're still in it, right? Like you're still interested. But I remember seeing a lot of that. And then I remember there was a period where, and you can tell me whether this is correct or not, I had a feeling that you were posting about NBA fan fiction. And then I realized that it was actually probably, it had always been a ship in particular from what I eventually worked out was the Netflix series Arcane, which is a really schmancy animated series based on the League of Legends franchise. And then it kind of snapped into focus, and a lot of things made more sense to me.
Yeah, I would say that my fandom, as you mentioned, I have these, what are they called, like micro fixations, or very like, oh, I'm going to be really into this for 6 months, or I'm going to be really into this for 6 months. And I had, as a teenager, a website that hosted fan fiction on Angel Fire, and
Oh man.
Oh, fantastic. You were one of the early providers.
yes, I learned the HTML where you could put like a little counter on your website to let you know how many visitors
Yes.
you had. And and I had a MIDI music that played when you open the website. I had a little MIDI library, which I was like accumulating through different
Yes.
MIDI websites. And so at that point in my life, I was watching Toonami and I was reading Animorphs. And so I had these fan fictions that I was writing, that my friends were writing, that I was hosting about all these sort of, from, Sailor Moon fan fiction or Dragon Ball Z fan fiction. And then I sort of put that part of me away for like, I want to say like 30 years or 20 years. And then it all has sort of like returned in the last year after I watched this show, where I felt like I was not really prepared for how interested in the show I would be. I was telling someone that I had no plans to watch this show. I saw that it was on Netflix. I saw that it was like this prestige adaptation of a popular video game that's online. I think it's a MOBA.
Yes, it is a MOBA.
It's a MOBA, which I think was it Massive Online Battle Arena?
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think of it fondly. The whole genre was called briefly by people when they were trying to work out, because it's based on a mod that was made for like a Warcraft game that then spun out into its own genre. And there was a period where people who were really into the genre were trying to popularize the term Lord's Management. It was a Lord's Management game. And I really wish that had stuck, because the idea of managing a Lord is one of the most beautiful things I can imagine.
Yeah, that sounds so important.
How else will they know how to behave?
They'll just go off. They'll just kind of go off. They'll just like just complete chaos throughout the countryside. These lords, no one's managing them. They're out of control. So basically what happened is I have a lot of friends who are video game nerds, who are board game nerds, and we had rented a house in New Hampshire last year to play board games and video games and hang out. And everyone was like, oh, maybe we will have like a viewing, like a group viewing party of Arcane Season 2 while we're up in New Hampshire. That didn't end up happening, but to prepare for that like hypothetical viewing party, I did watch season 1 just so I wouldn't be really a party pooper, just so I would be, on the same page as everyone. And then we didn't end up watching season 2 at the house. I went home and watched season 2 by myself. And that's when it really started because I wasn't ready for season 2. I wasn't like emotionally girded. And ever since then, I've been on this journey at this fandom, which I had not belonged to previously and which I had not been planning to contribute to in any way. But it has been like a complete discovery.
That's so cool. So yeah, I didn't realize that this was kind of a new thing and that it was tied specifically to this show. Like when you were working on your Angel Fire site, were you sort of, and you mentioned some series, the Toonami series, were you kind of an equal opportunist fan fiction host? What was different about the Angel Fire site and what you chose to showcase there?
Back when you had Angel Fire, you had to I believe you had to insert all of the HTML yourself. I don't think I had any like content or like quality measurements that I was using. I was in middle school. I didn't understand moderation in any sort of like mature, sophisticated way. I'm just like, oh, I have friends, they're writing fiction, let's post it on the website. And so, and then you would go through the document and you would like add your little HTML to like make it look nice. But there were no like content warnings, there was no tagging. Like everything that AO3 does was not anything that either I was doing or even like dreamed of. The amount of like moderation and management, you go to it and you're like, this is such a mature system where everyone's sort of agreed on these rules and like what it means to tag and how important tagging is and how you should do it. And that's what we do in lieu of like mass censorship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the culture of tagging is so fascinating to me, partly because like there's a lot of like active problem solving in fan fiction communities and like negotiation of terms in a way that like coming from like the literary fiction world, like for years I've been saying if I ever like find myself in a situation where it seems like the thing to do, if I'm like ever having a conversation where somebody raises this, or if it ever feels right, I would be happy to just put some content warnings in the back matter, the front matter, whatever. I routinely provide them when I talk to people because like when I'm talking about my work to my friends, I want them to know like, hey, there's several deeply unpleasant things that are going to happen in this, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable next time you see me. So I would prefer that going in that you might have to do, or at least that you have the option to know if you want to. But I know so many people like in the publishing world, and I bet this is like less true in genres that I'm not so familiar with. I bet that a lot of this is happening formally or informally in like the world of romantasy or etc. But like so many of the people that I know, they're so mad at the idea that you would have warning in advance about what was going to happen. Like what you should do as a reader is sit down, receive the work, and then deal with the results. You should just have to accept whatever happens. That's the risk that you took when you get in there. And like the truth is that is most of the time more or less my preferred mode of receiving art. Like I do kind of just like I like to let it happen. I like to know as little as I can going in, but I also know that there are areas where I am sensitive, where I will check in advance. Is this going to happen? Like I am so anxious about seeing violence against animals now in films because the Criterion Collection will just straight up show you an ox getting gored or whatever, right? Without any warning at all, no indication in the description. And it's terrifying. And I'm a little jealous of the fan fiction culture in that way.
Yeah, ox scoring is definitely a tag. People are using. Yeah, and I think that the tagging is interesting because there are tags that I exclude, but for the most part, I use the tags to look for things. So you're like, oh, I really want to look for, a particular type of scenario. And, for something like the Arcane fanfiction that's so popular this ship has, I think, around 20,000 fan fictions on the AO3 site. So now I'm like, okay, now I really want to sort of dig into particular themes or particular scenarios. And so for me, it's like I'm not avoiding these tags, I'm using them to look for the next thing I'm reading.
Yeah, they've kind of helped me in some cases describe dynamics that I didn't realize that I enjoyed, or something that I enjoyed about a particular property. AO3 taught me mutual pining. And that is apparently like my jam. Is like I like both characters to be developing feelings for each other but not realize it for a very long time. And that's distinct from like a slow burn. So like I kind of mix and match there, but I gotta I'm narrowing in on what I enjoy, which I think is, I don't know, I think is valuable. I always had trouble like describing what kinds of books I liked or what kinds of stories I liked.
I also like when you look at the tags, and some of the tags are there for search purposes, and then there'll just be like a tag that's like, I don't know what he's thinking about over here, or like, and then they or something. I don't know. Like I people sort of admit in the tags that they don't actually know that this is a trope, or that there's stuff in there that's like, this is outside of my ability to describe it for right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna like throw that tag in there, but you'll see it. And this isn't searchable in any like real way, but it communicates that
Right.
going on that I have a hard time explaining or describing. And I appreciate that too when they're just like using the tag as sort of like as a cork board of like here's some tags that make sense. Here's some tags where I'm like still figuring out what to call this. Like I appreciate that upfrontness from the authors.
So you mentioned that there was a particular ship, and I don't think I know what you're talking about. But I don't think that we have officially spoken the ship into the podcast. So, like, talk a little bit about, like, this was kind of the thing that hit you unexpectedly about the show, right? Or one of the things that, like, was like, oh, okay, this is for me in a way that I didn't see coming.
Sure. So there are two characters in Arcane who are scientists, and one is named Jace, and one of them is named Victor. And they're introduced in episode 2. They meet each other immediately, and they work as partners throughout season 1. Season 2, things get a little bit crazier. But in season 1, they are partners in this venture called Hextech, which is a technology that uses magic for sort of a variety of purposes, including the hex gates, which are important in the series because they allow sort of faster than light transportation of goods to the city where they're in, called Piltover, which causes sort of this new age of prosperity for the city and is a very big deal. And the other side of this is that Heimerdinger, who's a member of the council and head of the academy, is very leery of magic because it has this history of causing sort of devastation to the world. But he's the only one who can really remember it because he is this sort of ageless being. So you have this magic-based technology creating a lot of good in the world, and also this sort of specter that sort of hangs across the show, both seasons, of like the dangers or downsides of magic. And that's sort of the space that these two scientists are negotiating for the whole series. Everything sort of really comes to a head in season 2, but the first season is them working together and also sort of them beginning to drift apart. Jace becomes a counselor. He sort of gets seduced by the political side of the equation, and then Victor, who is I know. And then Victor is, he has a condition which is chronic and which is degenerative. And so he is sort of looking at a certain point to use magic to try to heal himself or sort of break himself out of this sort of fate where he will pass away before he feels like he can make a real difference in the world and be remembered as, a great scientist, which is his goal. At the very end of the season 1, there is a sort of calamity. There's this destruction of the council room. There's a bombing, and that's where they leave you off in season 1, where I don't know who is even alive anymore. By end of season 1, and that's like the first half of their story. But I was intrigued, but I was not prepared for where they would take these characters going forward.
So when we talk about shipping, it's a funny thing because I feel like shipping is one of those like fundamental concepts in culture that like I don't know what the percentages are. I'd be curious about like both your opinions on this, like who knows and who doesn't. But there are people that know about shipping and there are people who don't. And the people who know understand like a whole bunch of stuff that the people who don't know about shipping like don't have any access to. And it's in their periphery. But I do think that a lot of things about the world are probably a little inscrutable now if you're not familiar with the basic concept. So just in case, I think basically everybody listening to this honestly is in the knows what shipping category. But like, what is shipping? How would you summarize like shipping generally and like in specific with relationship to these characters?
Sure. So shipping is short for, I believe, relationship, and it's about the fan's relationship to these characters that you want to or are invested in them and seeing them be in more romantic scenario. And sometimes these ships are canon ships, and sometimes they're not canon or semi-canon. Like, whether they are romantic within the show, they may be to a lesser or greater extent, but the fans have decided that what they really want is to see and hear and read about these characters in romantic contexts. And that's kind of where the shipping culture takes place, because sometimes those characters are obviously in a romantic relationship in the series, and sometimes they don't have any interaction at all within the series, and that's also a lot of fun to be able to come up with those scenarios.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think like people who are not familiar with shipping, I feel like there's a confusion about why you would want to be invested in the story of two characters like outside the show. Like, as long as there's been, I don't know, as long as there's been works of fiction, I feel like there have been people who are just like, oh, I love this couple, or I love these characters. But it's more recent, maybe like with fan works, that they would think about going outside the, like you said, the canon story to get that, to spend more time with the characters, I guess.
Well, and like telling other people that you had that fantasy is one of the more novel things, right? Because I assumed that people were shipping Sherlock Holmes and Watson from day one, right? But there wasn't necessarily a venue for telling people, by the way, I really love the idea of Sherlock and Watson together, and actually I've written some pretty explicit fan fiction about that idea.
Yeah, my vague sense, and I'm not a scholar on shipping, but my sense is that with something like Star Trek, and like the Spurk as like one of the main ships in the original series, that there is something about like it being mass media. There is something about, being able to mail your pages to other people and creating this sort of like fan club culture, which I think really kind of maybe emerged in the second half of the 20th century, where suddenly, millions of people are watching, the Star Trek show. And they're watching, the same episode together, like across the country.
Yeah.
And that, I think, kind of maybe just leads to a different culture than like a book where everyone's maybe reading it at different times, or there's this like less sense of connection or less sense of like a collective, immediate mass media culture.
Yeah,
Tracy,
I feel like
is there like a... Sorry, I was just going to ask you if there's a formative ship for you.
Oh.
I feel like I remember one that was of particular interest to you for a while, but I no longer remember the series. It was like a short run, like a 1 season or 2 season anime.
Oh, well, yeah, that's more recent, but you're probably thinking of number 6.
Yeah, although they kind of have a relationship explicitly in the show, right? Like,
no, I would say that's semi-canon, to use Rachel's term there. I think it's that particular show is built or is adapted from a boys' love light novel, but there is never like a canonical relationship. They don't get together. There's no talk of dating or taking the relationship in a sexual direction or anything. It's just the vibes that they love each other in sort of a more general, holistic way. So the fan culture was what took it to like, well, obviously they're together. They need to be together. So yeah, that one was very I was very into that one for a long time. And part of it was that's one where I got into a specific fan fiction author who was just really stellar, like just a really great writer in general. And she would come up with these very interesting scenarios. She was sort of what introduced me to the idea that you could have fan fiction that doesn't work with the original plot or setting of the story. That's like, here's an entirely new scenario. We're going to keep the dynamic between these two, but transport it into an entirely different sort of world and society and just see how it plays out here. But before that, no, I was reliant on those Angel Fire sites. It was just sort of like whatever anybody had the patience and wherewithal to put together. I was just like, oh, Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask. Excellent. I know them. So I read some very dubious, I think, in retrospect, Sailor Moon fan fiction, discovered tentacles, that kind of thing. Those weren't, and yeah, like you said, Rachel, that was before tagging, so I couldn't really. It was sort of just like you get what you get, and you find out afterward whether you liked it or not.
Tentacles are always very funny to me. Whenever
yes.
I just laugh and laugh. I'm like, yo, you guys. You guys are always getting into trouble.
Wacky situations.
Oh no, the tentacles are here. I wonder what they'll do. Oh, they do that thing they're always doing.
For no clear reason. This is like the number one
No.
reason that whole thing doesn't work for me is I'm like, what's their motive in this?
I think it becomes clear what their motive is, but they're like a single-celled organism often, where it's just sort of like, I guess they're driven to reproduce.
Yeah.
Question mark?
Not an exciting scenario for sure. I feel like there's another thing that is like where a lot of the friction, a lot of the heat, a lot of the frustration, but also a lot of the catharsis in this sort of fan culture is right now. Like some of the things that I sort of think of as shipping, as like fans going outside the text to create, scenarios, like you said, that are a little beyond what the text contemplates. In some cases, it's really just filling in blanks that the person who made it had to leave blank because of the conditions under which the work was produced, whether that's because it's in the Modao Shi books are kind of in that mode, right, where like it's basically there on the page, but because it was written in China under the circumstances that it was,
right,
they can't quite make it explicit, and so the fans are doing some work. They're filling in some blanks, but also to some extent they're just meeting the text where it is, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's also like that's the constraints of the genre too. Like that particular writer was working within sort of the I don't know that I'll say this right, wuxia genre. Like these characters were going to fly around on swords and they were going to hunt ghosts. Like that had to be kind of the thrust of the story, even if there were also heavy romantic elements.
Right. And then there's also like corporate edicts, right? It's like, it's not necessarily that I'm making this in a place where these characters are not legally allowed to be depicted together, but because so much of the creative energy that we have now, like it's funny. I feel like as fan culture has grown more and more a part of just how people interact with art, it's also become more a part of the production of mainstream culture, right? Like most Marvel properties are fan fiction for themselves, right? They just happen to have hired the people that did it in this particular instance. And in a lot of cases, the people producing the fan fiction are, if anything, a little bit hostile to the source material and the corporation that is paying them to create it. So you have these things where the people who are producing the primary text, who are in theory the authors, are doing so in a way that, again, that maybe they aren't allowed to depict some of the things that the fandom wants to see. maybe they never meant to in the first place, but there's an ambiguity that is produced by the conditions in which the work was done. And it ends up being a source of like a lot of, again, there's a lot of like, there's an erotic thrill in that kind of thing, right? There's a joy in the communication between the audience, the people making the art, even in the negotiation with the corporation in a weird way, that does, I think, enrich some of the things that happen in fan fiction, but also it gets really nasty sometimes, right? That because there's this constant, I feel like one of the biggest sources of friction generally is the contesting who owns the work and who gets to decide what is going to be within the bounds, even in fan fiction, and what isn't.
Yeah, like the Arcane show is really interesting because all these characters, or a lot of these characters, are inspired by characters from the game, but also often like heavily rewritten or revised from the game. And there's an expectation that these characters will exist way after Arcane ended. And so I think there was a lot of hostility toward the executive producer of Arcane, who kind of talked about the relationships in this sort of authoritative way where, he's calling, these two characters brotherly, which obviously you can't do that. For people who ship them, it's infuriating to those people. But also there's a sense of like, well, you didn't come up with these characters. Like these characters existed way before your show started. So why are you acting like the author of these characters when you were the steward of this ship, of this, not ship, but this sort of conveyor belt where we are going to hang out with these characters for a while in this more sort of like narrative based context before they return to, the world of the games, and you're acting like you have the final say about what their relationships are. And so I feel like there was a lot of anger about that. And not just like what he was saying, but like the level of authority he was sort of presuming to have over them, I think rubbed a lot of people in these communities the wrong way. And you can say, well, it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't like bother yourself with what he says, or maybe it's a bit knee jerk to be so mad at him based on like what his thoughts on the characters are. But I think there's a lot of tension, again, as you said, about like who owns them, who gets to say how they feel about each other, and where we go from here.
I think fan communities have rightly noted that sometimes the director or the producer or the writer will come out and say like, oh no, those relationships are just sort of the imaginings of fans and we didn't put that in there. But more and more it's becoming very obvious that they're well aware of those dynamics and that they're aware they're including like, homoerotic tensions or, something that's not, that brotherly doesn't really cover it. They're well aware that they're baiting, right? Like they're including that so that people will get invested in the story to some extent. And then they're also, they're having their cake and eating it too by just being like, no, that was unintentional. If you read that into it, that's on you. That's not something we ever intended to have in there. So I think fan communities have like rightly been pushing back on that. Like, no, you know what you kind of built into the story. You're just denying it.
And why the need to deny it? Like there's no, for me, like non-prejudicial reason to push back against that stuff in particular compared to other ideas. It's sort of like, no, these guys are so heterosexual. And you're like, what is driving you as a person to have to, be so adamant about the orientation of these fictional drawings? That is a little fun on your part.
Yeah, you end up having this dynamic where the fandom is looking to some extent for the people that are producing the show, which is again to some extent a corporation, to sort of validate and acknowledge their existence, right? They're saying because like you said, there's no reason to deny these things actively or to embed them sort of implicitly in the narrative, but never allow them to come to the fore that is not based in like a certain fundamental contempt for some of your audience, right? So you're looking to the corporation saying, could you please prove that you don't hate me by just going ahead and like either endorsing the thing in the fiction or just letting me have it and not like fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really rough relationship to be in with a corporation. I think partly because there's a way in which, like, I've heard people talk about that in really condescending, really nasty ways. Like, but we currently exist in a situation where corporations do own a huge chunk of the culture. And so you do end up looking to the corporation as if it were like your relative who doesn't quite understand you, and that's an embarrassing relationship to have with the company, but that's where we are, that's where we live, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's sort of like I think there is sort of like an attempt or this idea of like calling the corporation's bluff a little bit. Like you're like, "Oh, all you care about is money." Well, like let us help you understand that
Mm-hmm.
it's in your interest to be supportive of how we view your work. And that is a different dynamic than if you were like a single artist, or it should be like a single artist who, writes a book. Obviously that is a human being who, is an artist. And they should have a certain freedom and a certain amount of charity afforded them about how they view their work and how they speak about it. When it comes to a corporation, I think a lot of that feeling feels unnecessary or not appropriate to your relationship with this huge company. You're like, do you want our money? Do you want us to support you? Well, then you need to, adhere to certain, a certain sense of camaraderie or, at least respect us in our position
Mm-hmm.
for your company, because we understand that you want our money. You want our money, and we like your show, and we want
Mm-hmm.
to give you money, but you have to play ball. And I think there's a kind of
Yeah. Yeah, like we're telling you what we're here for, so it's incumbent upon you to like listen at least and acknowledge that.
and I think there's like a level where all of this is like vaguely humiliating.
Yeah. But that's like all the best things are humiliating, right? Like that's part of the pleasures that are available in relating to other people. Like most of the deepest ones require making humiliation possible, or even like just it's just part of it. We're just gonna be humiliated together. That's part of what we're doing. I mean, that's kind of like what art is for, right? Is like the ability to sort of like manage things like humiliation and experience them together in kind of a safe way.
Well, and it's frustrating when it's like it's apparently humiliating to imagine that two male characters would be interested in each other romantically, but it's not humiliating to think Superman is just the coolest, most macho guy in his skin tight spandex and his underwear over outside the outside of his uniform. That's not anything. That's just normal storytelling, and it's totally sexless, and we're fine with that.
Right. There's that way in which the sort of expected normative psychosexual fantasy playscape is allowed to be invisible, and people are allowed to avoid the humiliation, avoid the shame, avoid the potential for embarrassment that is kind of like necessary for like really satisfying relationships with art. Like they don't have to risk those things because Superman's undies are not scrutinized, or to the extent that they are, they're just treated as like mildly embarrassing, and mostly you get rid of them. It's like problem solved. Now it's not embarrassing at all. And the negotiation with the fandom, like it brings all of these. I part of what I think is so fascinating about fan fiction to me is like these negotiations were happening before, and they happen just like when you write and when you read, even if there's no, if you're writing in total obscurity and there's no expectation that anybody is necessarily going to see it, and if you're reading something that somebody wrote like 200 years ago, you're still having these negotiations. They're just not as codified.
Yeah, I think that obviously the internet is a place where everyone can read and see each other, and so all of the stuff that had been happening in one presumes monasteries or in fields, uh, suddenly we're all privy to each other's fantasies and frustrations with regard to the show we all watch together, and just all of the sort of discourse that sort of emerges from it, sort of like just like a fire hose of it. And you're sort of trying to locate the version of this fandom or community that is fun for you, or that is like the least humiliating version of it, where you don't feel like you're wasting your time or you're getting into sort of these maximally hostile dynamics. And it's a lot. It's it's a curated experience, but that I think is can be as frustrating or challenging as it is like personally satisfying.
So I definitely want to ask about. I want to ask about like any fan fiction authors that you want to talk about, but I did think it would be fun to also talk about fan fiction writing. Tracy, am I allowed to mention that you have written some fan fiction? I'm not allowed to ever know what it was or to see it.
Yeah. No, exactly. You can mention it because you don't know anything about it. So it's fine.
Yeah.
You can reveal nothing.
I'll reveal my shameful fan fiction, which I gave Tracy a little warning about this in advance, just to kind of like workshop, like, how am I going to describe this? Because I arguably invented Mpreg when I was like 12 or something.
Bold claim.
Yeah, so I mean, it was, it's what do they call that? Like parallel discovery. Like I assume that many of us were inventing it simultaneously and in the years before and in the years after, and that someone's inventing Mpreg right now. But for the listener, if you are not so fortunate as to know about Mpreg, it is a tag one could apply to fiction where a man becomes pregnant. And so when I was like 11, 12, 13, I don't know. I played Final Fantasy IX. Have you ever played that?
I don't think I have. I've played some of the other Final Fantasies, but I don't think 9 in particular.
Yeah. So there was a relationship in the game that I really enjoyed, which was so there's a little black mage named Vivi, who so a black mage is there's a couple terms in Final Fantasy that feel racist if you don't have the context to know what to picture when I say it, and if I describe it, it honestly doesn't get that much better. But if you Google it, it's okay. It's all right. It's just a little shadow guy who does like black magic, and he's got like a witch hat and stuff and
Yeah,
puffy
he has
pants.
a big wizard hat.
Yeah.
He's really small. He's like small, right?
Yes, yeah, because he's
Yeah.
like a child. And his thing in the game is that initially he doesn't quite know where he came from. And he eventually discovers what black mages are, how they were made, where they come from, etc. And it turns out that they are in that game, they're essentially created as weapons. And they have a
they're
really
like mass
limited lifespan.
produced.
Yes. Yeah. And so he learns that even though he's a kid, he's got like, I don't know, a year before he's gonna die. And meanwhile, simultaneously, he's been making good friends with a character named Steiner, who is this really upright, really, really, stick in the mud knight who I don't remember why he like loses his job for some reason I don't remember, and so he's been brought low, and they they become good friends, good platonic friends, and I want to be clear that in my fan fiction I did not make them not platonic friends because again, one of them is a kid and one of them is like a 40-year-old knight who like wears a kind of surprising amount of eyeliner. But so at the end of that game, spoilers for Final Fantasy IX, there's a time lapse and Vivi dies. When you see the time lapse, you're like, oh, he's gonna be dead when we're on the other side of that. That's unfortunate. And eventually, though, you meet. I think he has like 6 or 7 or 9 kids. He has somehow spawned a bunch of little copies of himself. And they don't explain it at all. There's nothing in the game to tell you where they came from or how that could happen. Nothing about the fiction.
Yeah, there's no other similar instance in the
No.
game. In fact, he's the only like young kid, like he's the only kid version of a black mage you see in the game.
Yeah, the rest look
Everyone
like
else is an
adults.
adult.
Yes.
Huh.
So I decided that I wanted to write a story about how that happened because I really loved Vivi and I really enjoyed his relationship with Steiner. And so I wrote this maudlin short story that was about the moment, like their friendship, and then the moment where Vivi was lying in his deathbed waiting to pass on to the other side. And Steiner is holding his hands, and
Oh,
there's like a surge of emotion in Vivi as he's about to die that he feels from Steiner. And then he like sprouts these kids. And I
I love.
tried to find it.
Do you know where you posted it?
I posted it to my personal website. I had a website that was just my stuff that I wrote, and it was like reviews of movies I liked and things about books I enjoyed and
Oh
albums
man.
and like,
Wow.
photos of me trying to look pretty. And so my Final Fantasy IX fan fiction was on there, and I did try today to see if I could find it in the Internet Archive, and I am honestly very grateful to say it cannot be found. That was the main reason I was looking it up. I was like, if I describe this, is somebody going to be able to find it? And the answer seems to be no. But like, man, it's a wild thing to look back on, and again to know that it was sort of parallel development. That like a lot of people were developing the same technology of how to deal with weird, embarrassing feelings about their video games and their anime
Mhm.
that I didn't have any awareness of. Like I didn't have any visibility into that scene. I thought I was like basically inventing this whole concept.
Mm. Incredibly beautiful story. I love the mechanics of that story.
Well, and I think you like highlighted this version of fan fiction. Like there's kind of a version of it where it's filling, like you said, it's filling in gaps that the story didn't tell you. You're trying to figure out like an actual problem in a way of like where did these little VVs come from? And you're doing it with a really cool narrative that like makes sense with the relationships and dynamics in the story. And then there's that kind of fan fiction. That's the kind of fan fiction I see a lot in I'm a huge fan of Godzilla, and I've started getting the fan back issues of the fan magazine, and there's usually some fan fiction in there, and it's like it's never romantic. That is not what the authors who write into GFan are interested in about Godzilla. And I think I'm glad about that, honestly. But they usually are just filling in gaps in stories. They're just like, oh, they never did follow up what happened with that Navy crew or something, or that group that went on that expedition. What were they getting up to on that island? But there's now I feel like fan fiction is more interested in exploring the same ground that the series itself tread, just in deeper, I guess.
Mhm.
And I think that there's like the modern AU where you're like, oh, let's take these characters into a modern setting, and you see that all the time. A lot of those are like the most popular fan fictions of that particular ship or of that particular series, or like, I just really want to see these characters in our world. You can debate whether that's like we really like the characters, but we don't want to work on the world building, or there's just like a very particular set of priorities of people who are excited to work in like a modern AU versus like what you're talking about, like the in canon, canon compliant stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This might as well have happened, or this could have happened without changing anything within the story of the main show or of the main game. You're like, absolutely, they could have been holding hands, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
he gave birth to all those mini mages. And and that doesn't change anything. It's just a way
Yeah.
it could have happened.
Yeah, as I recall, honey, I think you would have tagged that canon compliant character death.
That sounds right.
Sadly, Vivi does still die, but
And then a canon divergent story would be about how he didn't die. I don't know. They figured it out. They
yeah.
figured out how to save him, and then him and Steiner can figure out how to raise all their little babies together.
Oh, so sweet.
The other thing that I feel like really defines that like my relationship to that story and to a lot of the fan fiction that I have seen is that there is a comfort with sentimentalism that is very difficult to it's a violation of sort of the professional code of conduct of storytelling, right? Like if you're writing for a TV show, if you're writing a novel, if you're writing a movie, the rule is you're not supposed to be too sentimental unless you want people to think that it's slop, right? Unless you want it to be really embarrassing art for babies, you're not supposed to do that. And like fanfic, it's not like that's not attention in fan fiction, but because it is so much about embodying your narrative desires in the form that you want them and then seeking them out that, from other people that have had those same things and, finding the tag, like you said, that really lets you experience the dynamic you really wanted to feel. You're allowed to hit that note over and over and over and over again, right? You're allowed to do exactly the thing that you want to do and not attend to anything else if you don't want to, and just keep going for the tears or whatever kind of physiological response you're hoping to get. And that's okay. And that's like both what makes it kind of a challenging culture to get into at times, because like when you read the story that is hitting the note over and over again, that is not the thing that you want, it's miserable. But when you get the thing that is what you want, that like there's a kind of, again, there's a negotiation of, there's a different relationship to the negotiation of desire than with non-fan works that I find like really interesting.
I think you absolutely see a lot of like hurt comfort fics in like the arcane community. An author I really like named Sulky Bender really is an expert at like the 2,000 to 3,000 word hurt comfort fic. Which is generally one of the character of like Jason Victor, one of them taking care of the other one. Sometimes canon, sometimes within the original world, sometimes like a modern world version. But I think there's a lot of desire to explore what it means for these characters to not be miserable.
Yeah.
And again, as you said, it doesn't always make sense to have these passages or have these sections like within the non-fan work. Non-fan work often has very strong priorities toward like, let's get this exciting story, like let's have this thing blow up and have everything and have all these fights and all these battles and all this like intrigue. And especially like when the story is shorter and has like fewer opportunities to rest or breathe, you're just not going to have stylistically any room for a passage where people just take care of each other or enjoy each other or comfort each other. And so the fan works allow that space to explore those dynamics. The other side of that coin are like the dead dove fics, which are very different. Which are sort of like the opposite and the opposite impulse, where you're like, oh, let's have some extremely unrelatable or unsympathetic or just like evil
Yeah.
action taking place by our main characters in a way that you're like, you could not have this character do this because it would change the stakes of the entire show. But people are like, well, what if he did do this like incredibly socially taboo thing? Let's explore that and what that might look like for this character to behave this way that is sort of outside the bounds of the original story.
I'm glad you mentioned that tag. I had not thought about that, but that when that tag started showing up, I was just delighted that an Arrested Development joke had like crossed into the fan fiction world and become this, actually, as it turns out, extremely useful term, because it doesn't feel apologetic to the audience. It's not saying like, sorry guys, this one might be pretty icky for some of you. It's just kind of like, fair warning, dead dove, do not eat. I don't know. Have you encountered this, Mike? Is this something you've run into?
No, I've really fallen off the fan fiction wagon. I recently tried to read one that I saw somebody mention on Blue Sky as what they felt like. They were saying like, I think this is the true sequel to Disco Elysium. And it's called The Fury of a Shattered Mirror. It's 485,344 words
title.
long. It's so long. And it's written by a spooky and Thude 74 apparently, and it alternates between like really closely imitating the dialogue boxes and like menus of Disco Elysium, and
Oh.
I assume it's doing the same thing with the other game that it's sort of crossing over with, which is Slay the Princess, but I haven't played that game, so I don't recognize it. I've tried to spend a little time with that one recently, and I'm gonna try again because I just love that this stuff exists, but it is hard for me to get on its wavelength a lot of the time. I do struggle a little bit with like the fact that it is 485,000 words. That's challenging for me. That's more words than I usually give a thing.
I do skim a lot. I find that, as opposed to when I'm reading a book, I tend to, read every word in it. But with fan fiction, I feel like I can see the different moves that the writer is trying out. You know what I mean? So I can kind of tell when they're like maybe they kind of have a B plot or something where it's like, I want to get this this other relationship in here. Like maybe this character, in addition to whatever their romantic relationship is that they're exploring, maybe they also have this family relationship that I want to portray and dig into a little bit. And I can just sort of be like, oh, okay, they're doing the B plot now. It's all these characters. I didn't come here for them. So, so I often just sort of plow through some of these huge fics with a voraciousness that I do not match with my normal reading. And that's something that I kind of hope to work on in a way.
For me, the ideal amount of fan fiction is like 5,000 words to like 23,000 words. To me, that's like a real sweet spot. If it's more than 23, I'm like, I cannot promise myself. I could lose the tab.
Yeah.
It's always so I don't know. I always feel a personal flaw when people recommend a fan fiction and I look it up and it's 70,000, 80,000 words and I'm like, I'm not going to read that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's just respecting your time.
Well, I've said that every episode of this podcast, because it is about reading, actually ends up being about shame, right? Like there's so much shame tied up in reading and not reading. And so like for me, I don't want to speak for you, Tracy, but like the dynamic you're describing sounds to me a little bit like with fiction that is published that is not designated as fan work, you feel as if on some level you are accountable for the content, right? Like there might be a test, somebody might ask you in a conversation at a party, what did you think of it? And you need to be able to describe it accurately, because if you're caught out as not having internalized, like if you didn't do the reading, you might get in trouble, right? Whereas with fan fiction, you know that there's no risk of anybody calling you to account for that. Even if you did talk about it, you're allowed to not read all the fan fiction words. Like you're allowed to do whatever you want with it. So like, you have this freedom to use it in a way that like you also do have with non-fan fiction, but it's hard to feel that freedom. Like I don't feel that freedom, right? Like I feel like I do, even with the fan fiction. I'm like, I got to read every word of this fake menu from Disco Elysium so I can make sure that I'm understanding the art. And it's, like that's a valid way to experience those things. But I do think there's really something to be said for that. Like, I'm getting what I want out of this, and the rest of it can be whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I had never really thought of it as that. I feel like I'll be called to account for reading, literary fiction or, traditionally published fiction. I think for me, it just is, being part of literary reading communities as we have been, as writers and people who went and got MFAs. Like people will talk about Dostoevsky with the same passion that they might talk about one of these shows that I enjoy, and I have always felt the gulf between that. Like they're allowed to talk as much as they want and as passionately as they want, as long as the subject or, that the book is considered good. But if I want to talk about like this amazing move that I saw, or literary move, like a, you know, like a stylistic decision I saw in a fanfic by Nezumi Prefers Danielle Over Shakespeare. One, it's not like a common ground, right? Like they definitely almost haven't read it. And two, I have to explain so much to get them anywhere close to understanding what I'm trying to say about it. I have to explain the plot of number 6, and then also like what this author is doing, and then also why fan fiction can be good ever. And yeah, and you know, to that point too, like I read garbage fan fiction too. Like not everything I read is phenomenal for by any stretch. So yeah, it's sort of like I don't know how to have those conversations, honestly, with like a literary crowd.
There is like part of me that like I've tried to explain Arcane and Javik to different people, just because a lot of times they read my feed and they're like, oh, what are you posting about? What is this deal you have? And I have this sort of eternal hope that I will be able to articulate it in just the right way, that people are like, oh, I get it. And then like we'll be on the same wavelength. Like that, me being unable to like communicate why this is exciting or important to me is like a flaw in my own like rhetorical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm like,
Yes.
oh, you don't understand. It's like good. It
Well,
sounds bad, but it's good.
Right.
I feel like that's a lot of my favorite stuff is it sounds bad if you hear it summarized, but the actual experience of the text is good. I'm curious, like I don't know how to ask this in a way that like is not putting you on the spot, but I kind of want to hear like I don't know if I want to hear you trying to explain, like summarize what is the thing that you wish people understood, or if I'd like to hear your description, like if you felt no responsibility for me or Tracy to anyone to understand
Mm.
it, like we didn't have to get it, what would you want to say about it and like why it is important to you?
I think that oh, it's it's hard, obviously. I think that for me, Arcane is a show that's about a lot of suffering and a lot of, and apparently this is sort of an extension of the like the League of Legends world. A lot of like not getting what you want or being denied or being sort of in thrall of larger uncontrollable powers. And I think that for me, these two characters, they just want to do good in the world, that you really invest in them. I think for me, like in large part while you're watching the show, you're like, these are the characters who are just trying to stumble through this really chaotic, hostile, violent world, and you just want the best for them. And they're obviously finding some sort of comfort or love or fellow feeling in each other. You just want them to be able to find some happiness that isn't fleeting or that isn't doomed,
Mm-hmm.
or isn't sort of subverted by their circumstances. And I think that that feeling that you have throughout the show about various characters to various extents, because there's it's easy to forget when you're talking about this that Arcane has many characters, has dozens of characters. I think someone made a video that was all of Victor's scenes in the first season, and they total 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh,
And it's like
yeah.
an hour-long show, right?
Yeah, every episode's like 40 to minutes to an hour. There's like 8 episodes in each season. So it's not as long as, a season of ER in 1996, but there is significant footage in each season, and Victor's presence, especially in season 1, is like tantalizing, because he's
Mm-hmm.
not in that much. That you see him, he comes in, he's like, I'm doing my best. I just want to do good for people. I come from nothing. I'm very smart. I'm
Oh.
and you feel like the show's just like taking away his ability to accomplish like his very simple wants, which is just to be a scientist and to make discoveries. And then in season 2 there's more of him, but he's never in his right mind. It's complicated, don't worry about it, but he's just not in his right mind for season 2, and you're just like, oh, I just feel denied this guy ever gets a moment of happiness that isn't like immediately undercut by the circumstances. And so I think that these two characters, you're like, you want to envision a world where they get even like 5 minutes off or just an afternoon free.
What you're saying sort of reminds me of, I don't know, just sometimes the structures inherent in fiction, or at least the ones that are sort of popularized, are punishing by their nature, you know? Like we're driven as writers to like complicate things for the characters, to thwart things they want, or to deny them things they want, so that it's more rewarding when they get them, or maybe they get what they want and they find out it's not what they want at all. So there's all these, it is odd. Yeah, there's not a lot of room in sort of official fiction for, like you said, just being nice to the characters for a little bit and letting them have a nice time, because we consider that like dead air, and that's sad. I think fan fiction is a sort of response to that, to sort of say, no, this can be part of the story too. Let's see the ways that maybe it could be.
Yeah, and I don't know to what extent like the rhythms of fiction itself are like resistant to these sort of pockets of like serene happiness. You're like, well, if we're not flowing into the next conflict or the next tension, or not like, using this as like table setting for the next, epic confrontation, then it's just a waste, and it also probably disturbs like the rhythms of the rest of the piece. So you're like, well, we can't have that because it becomes disjointed, or it becomes arrhythmic. And so you're like, oh, every scene has to be flowing into or out of the last or next conflict, or the next or last tension. And then you can't feel like you're responsibly including this type of work inside of the larger story. And I understand that. And it's also like, as somebody who feels while you're reading or watching, it can feel like you're this continual denial.
Right. Which is like, it's an important aspect of how it works. This is what you're saying. I'm just restating what you're saying. That denial is important, but I do think it is to some extent, I don't know if the word I want is ideological. It's a decision that we made at some point, right? And that I think was formalized particularly by MFA programs, that we went to. And I think you do see some differences on this in places that didn't have the MFA culture sort of take over the production of like TV writing and things like that.
Like international writing is sometimes quite different. Yeah,
exactly. And I feel like something that's been interesting for me, and I'm not sure how much this is just like me getting older and I'm ascribing things that are more like generational to other kinds of shifts, but I have felt like mainstream fiction, stuff on Netflix, things have felt more like fan fiction to me over time, and sometimes in ways that are kind of irritating to me, because I do have that feeling of, I want the next conflict, I want the next problem. Like, I am pretty tied to that belief system. But I often end up feeling, when I identify what feels to me like a fan fiction vibe in something that is not fan fiction, like, I wonder if this is partly people that are younger than me that have internalized some of those rhythms, looking productively for ways to like bring that in and broaden what is allowed in mainstream original, for lack of original fiction doesn't feel like the way to, I don't know what to put as opposed to fan fiction, right? Like, because original is not the word, especially because like most not fan fiction is almost as derivative as fan fiction, if not more so, right? Like so much stuff is just Star Trek or Indiana Jones or whatever, but with the label removed.
And I know that there's like, I feel like there's this idea of fan fiction, and then there's this idea of like Steven Universe or like tender queer or like
Mhm.
sort of hostile to conflict, which I understand and appreciate is also something that is happening sometimes in the new fictions, and there's obviously some overlap in that, and yeah, and obviously we're all we're all trying to find the way to tell stories in the way that's satisfying but not cloying and,
Mhm.
and not frustrating, where it's not all misery but it's also not like where you feel like you're being condescended to by the work.
Mhm.
And it's obviously a real tightrope, and everyone's kind of bringing their own expectations. And so, yeah, I don't know how people write fiction now.
Gosh, how do you do it? I'm thinking about it now. Because I mean, I do still write fiction, but I do have I have the benefit of being totally obscure, and so no one ever calls me out on how I'm balancing those things, because like, essentially no one has ever read my work or ever will. If anyone were seeing it, I don't know what I'd do.
I've simply switched to nonfiction.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Fiction was fun while it lasted, and
Mhm.
now we just, it causes too many people to be angry, so we're just gonna kind of put it
Yeah.
aside for now.
It's a broken genre.
Is there a swinging from vine to vine sort of thing where, like, do you feel right now like I'm looking for the next thing that is going to be this, or is it like the next thing that's going to be this is like some totally, like, you're going to get way into golf, or like something you never could have seen coming? Like, is this, I guess part of what I'm asking is whether you feel like this is kind of a slot on your character sheet, like a thing that you want to equip other things to in the future, or does this feel more like in this moment this is useful to me, and later I don't know what I'm going to be doing?
Well, it's funny because of the nature of Arcane. Like, Arcane is over. There will be, other shows set in the world,
Mm.
or at least that's the announcement. That's sort of their current plan. And obviously more video games set in that world. But the show itself is concluded. And you definitely see, as the months go by, you're like, oh, my favorite JVic artist, you're like, oh, they've really sort of moved on. They're drawing new
Mm-hmm.
guys and new couples and new shows that I've never seen or don't particularly care about. And I haven't had any sort of major impulse to find two new guys from a new show. Um, Part of me, because I really I think that if I was somebody, I think it's called a multi-shipper. You're like, oh, I love all sorts of ships. I, bounce between them. They all kind of give me a different flavor, a different feeling, and they are it's satisfying to appreciate a wide variety of ships. For me, whenever I look at a different ship, I feel a little sad in a weird way, where I'm like, I really like these two guys. I don't know if I want to. Uh, I know it's like absurd. You're like, I don't want to be disloyal, or I don't want to like, I just like don't have, I think that if something else happens, it will be probably in a very different medium or in a very different context, where I don't feel like I'm replacing like the square with another square. It'll be
Mm.
a different shape. Yeah, sports is sort of something that I get interested in, and I've been watching, the playoffs for baseball, and I've been getting into those, and that's a lot of fun. And I don't know what's like next for me in terms of like my next major interest. I feel like it sort of has to avail itself. I don't feel like I can choose it or decide on it. I assume that I'll come across it and it'll just strike me in a particular way, and it won't necessarily resemble the things that I've been interested in the past. NBA still exists. The show Arcane still exists. I still like it. I still like these characters and the art and fiction people are making from them. So I assume that the next thing for me will take me by surprise and will not be premeditated in any respect.